Good evening, everyone. This is Mike Romali here with the Hurricane Season 2020 update, part of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for September 12th, 2020, recorded around 6:36 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, taking a look here at the visible satellite imagery, we do have a lot to discuss this evening. First of all, with newly designated tropical storm Sally, remains a little bit disorganized this evening, and you can kind of see the hints of that here on the visible satellite imagery. You can see what appears to be an exposed or a partially exposed low-level center of circulation here around Naples, Florida, and right off of about Fort Myers. And this seems to be moving off towards the north-northwest here. And again, this is not really active with any deep convection at the moment. It seems like all of the deep convection is still associated out to the south of where the storm is currently. So this means that the storm is not really significantly organized at the moment. It still has a little while to go. What is likely to end up happening is this area of spin down here likely is going to form a new low-level center of circulation. We will likely see this center up here kind of drift around and weaken with time. And since pressures are still quite high, it is likely that we'll start to see a new center, a low-level center form down somewhere in this vicinity, and this will now become the new dominant circulation center within this much broader envelope. So there is a lot kind of at play here. Now, we can see again some of this kind of taking place here on the radar imagery. And again, this is coming out of the Miami radar site down there in Miami, Florida, right near Hialeah. But you can see that what we have is a general kind of trend towards less convection to the north of this area. Again, this is kind of the Fort Myers area generally and through here. And what you can kind of see is that we don't have a lot of substantial deep convection that is firing near that exposed low-level center, and it's probably a little bit further north than that. But this area down here, closer down towards per se like Key West, etc., this area down here is likely to be the new possible area that we do get a center reformation. Again, it's going to be right now very hard for the center to be necessarily tugged southward, because the low and mid-level centers are now getting far enough apart from each other that it's unlikely to create much of a kind of a drift down per se, and we actually kind of see the system stall out. So right now it appears that the older low-level center will probably drift around and weaken with time while we get a more dominant low-level center to form down here in the more persistent area of deep convection. Now you can also see the one problem here that we have is a lot of showers and thunderstorms right now across portions of the Florida Keys and South Florida, and all the way up here. We did have an earlier tornado warning for Hardy and Polk County as a storm tried to develop an area of rotation. Now again, this is going to be moving off towards the north and west, so this will gain some latitude with time. And the older low-level center could still try to form a couple of showers and thunderstorms around it, which may actually help to kind of generate more rainfall further towards the north. So this is going to be something that we're going to have to watch pretty carefully, at least over the next couple of hours. Now, as we switch gears here over towards Tropical Storm Paulette, it is looking a little bit better organized this evening and does have sustained winds of near 70 miles per hour, but you can still tell it's a pretty sheared tropical cyclone at the moment. You can tell one thing is that the showers and thunderstorms are mainly getting pushed off towards the west and northwest side of our storm, and that is because that we still have some southeasterly shear that's being impinged on our storm, and that's kind of been the main thing. Is we've had a lot of shear over top of Paulette over the last really 72 hours or so, and now we've started to see the shear direction change as it pivots around a kind of occluding upper level low, which will eventually begin to kind of retrograde. This will allow the shear to decrease over top of our storm. But the one thing that we do have to kind of keep in mind is notice all of this dry mid-level air and, kind of surrounding the storm on the east and southeast side. Now, with the southeasterly shear, that means that this dry air around the storm environment has a better shot of getting entrained into our center of circulation and can disrupt the inner core structure. Now, this evening we have seen maybe some hints of a mid-level eye developing with Paulette. Again, although it is reasonably inferred that the low-level center of circulation right now is not necessarily co-located with the mid-level center, which is probably in through here, with the low-level center probably down somewhere in this general vicinity in here. So these two features are not necessarily co-located between each other, which is also causing the storm to not really intensify as quickly. Now you can see here, the one thing is that this will be approaching Bermuda pretty rapidly over the next several days. Hurricane warnings are in effect for that area, and we'll discuss the impacts here in a moment. As we also switch gears, we are tracking a new tropical depression in the Atlantic Basin. Tropical Depression 20 has formed. This was previously Invest Area 95L, and we have started to see a kind of a co-location with more of the spin in the atmosphere kind of percolating more of this deep persistent convection, and as such we have started to see more organization and a closed low-level center form. And just before the sunset kind of set on the storm this evening, you did happen to see these thunderstorm bands that continued to develop here and tried to rotate around from time to time. And we talked about this morning that these banding structures is a very good indication of a healthier tropical cyclone trying to develop. And you can see as we kind of progress through in this evening, the low-level center remains kind of disorganized and exposed, but we do have deep convection that percolates from time to time and tries to wrap around towards the northwest. So now intensification of this will kind of be slow to occur over the next couple of days, but a faster rate of intensification is expected into portions of early next week. Now, if we look here at the official forecast for Tropical Storm Sally, the Hurricane Center does bring this to about an 85-mile-per-hour hurricane or a strong Category 1 hurricane at the landfall point here near southeastern Louisiana. Now, if we zoom in even further, there is a tropical storm watch that is in effect from the Florida Panhandle line all the way down to near Pensacola and almost to near Tallahassee. And a hurricane watch has been issued from near Lake Pontchartrain and also includes the New Orleans metro region. There is a hurricane watch for the New Orleans metro all the way out here to near Mobile Bay and towards the western part of the Florida Panhandle. Now, you notice here that the one thing that is generally concerning is that this will be a very slow-moving storm. You can see this is the 2 p.m. Sunday kind of mark here, and that's 2 p.m. Monday. The storm really is not moving much and is expected to kind of just meander around in this area for the next couple of days. Not only could this allow for a little bit of a intensification bout, but it could also spell trouble in terms of very heavy rainfall and a prolonged period of storm surge across this region, which could actually be very damaging. About 6 to 9 feet of storm surge is expected, with about 20 inches of rain right here across portions of southeastern Louisiana. So Louisiana, unfortunately, the western part got hit with Laura about a month ago, and now we are starting to see the makings of what could be a pretty disastrous storm down here for southeastern Louisiana. And not just the eastern Louisiana problem. If we look here all the way, we'll look at the storm surge. If we just kind of pop on the Hurricane Center map real quick. Now we're going to take a look here at the peak storm surge values. 1 to 3 feet of storm surge is expected all the way in through portions of Cedar, basically from Cedar Bay all the way over to St. Andrew Bay, Pensacola Bay, the Alabama-Florida border. 1 to 3 feet of storm surge. So this gets, up into, places, just to the north and west there of Tampa. So some areas, especially up, near Cedar Key, could see 1 to 3 feet of storm surge. And obviously Lake Borgne, Lake Pontchartrain, Lake Borgne 6 to 9 feet, and Lake Pontchartrain rather, 2 to 4 feet of storm surge and 2 to 4 feet for Mobile Bay. And the rainfall potential is what could be a very significant threat here. You can see even to the east of the storm, the kind of storm landfall area, we have rainfall amounts that could be in excess of 6 to 10 feet across portions of western Florida Panhandle, and upwards of 15 to 20 plus feet of, or inches of rain rather, up to about 15 to 20 inches of rain plus expected near the landfall point. And for the next couple of days, this is going to be an unfolding situation, so keep checking back with local officials and obviously heed any evacuation orders from your emergency management and local officials. With Tropical Storm Paulette, it is nearing hurricane intensity and will probably be there later tonight or maybe early tomorrow morning. A hurricane warning is in effect for Bermuda, as this is expected to kind of pass right near or over Bermuda. The current forecast has us passing basically right over the island of Bermuda and then turning northeastward. Now, the reason why that is, we'll get to why this is going to be moving off towards the north and east here in a little while. But the impacts here for Bermuda, again, a very strong hurricane, could be near major hurricane or category 3 intensity by the time it reaches Bermuda here, if it does manage to get an inner core structure going this evening. And then certainly as it passes, it will still be intensifying as it passes Bermuda, eventually trying to weaken once it gets out here into the cooler water and experiences vertical wind shear. But for Bermuda, unfortunately, this is almost worse than getting a direct hit by a category 3, because with a strengthening tropical cyclone, you get more impacts, you get the heavier rain, the heavier winds, than rather just a storm that's kind of just holding on as its intensity, holding on to its own, or whatever, or especially a weakening cyclone too. This is going to be a little bit worse. And for the island of Bermuda, of course, if anyone lives there, or if you know anyone there, call them, let them know, you have to prepare. Either way, final preparations should be completed by tomorrow afternoon, as the impacts will begin tomorrow evening and then in through Monday morning and in through afternoon. You can see here the positions by 2 a.m. Monday and 2 a.m. Monday and 2 p.m. Tuesday aren't necessarily that far apart, which means and implies that this is going to be moving a little bit slower as it moves through Bermuda. So the slow motion could also add towards some pretty significant rainfall totals. Storm surge obviously going to be a big problem, upwards, they're getting close to 9 plus feet of storm surge. Just generally a very unfavorable, a very life-threatening situation is going to be unfolding for the island of Bermuda. So it's just important to kind of take note. Either way, again, final preparation should be completed by early tomorrow afternoon, as conditions will deteriorate tomorrow evening and in through Monday Monday morning and afternoon, before finally clearing up Monday evening and in through the day Tuesday. Now, as for newly designated Tropical Storm 20, there is a lot of considerable uncertainties that kind of surround the future evolution of the storm. Remember a couple of days ago that we were kind of watching for the potential for this to maybe be a low rider that eventually impacts the Lesser Antilles. Well, now that has changed from the last few days. We've seen a change and a general progression towards a storm developing faster, but also moving further towards the northwest. And again, this is very important because a faster developing cyclone is now likely to take that turn out to sea and not really be of much concern. Although this may be something obviously for shipping interest, and once again, Bermuda, just down the road, we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that again. But this should be a system that does turn out to sea, and it looks the most probable at the moment. And we'll talk about those solutions here in just a moment. As for what's happening here with Tropical Storm Sally, again, this is the reconnaissance aircraft showing about 1,004 millibars here in the old low-level center, starting to turn more towards the north. So this implies that we may actually see a weakening trend with this old low-level center, and we'll probably get a new one to form somewhere down in this vicinity near Key West. Also kind of continuing with that, this is for Tropical Storm Paulette. They did find a bout of hurricane force flight level winds and a pressure in the low 980s. You can see here pressures were down to about 982 millibars, which does suggest that this is close to hurricane intensity, but you can see that we don't have any hurricane force flight level winds, or surface ones rather. 65 knots, or really 64 knots, is the threshold for the hurricane force winds, but you actually don't see that here. The hurricane force winds are only in the flight level, and at the surface you have a denoted rate here of about 60 knots. So this is very close. This is about 70 miles per hour still, but it is not at hurricane threshold yet, although the flight level winds here are nearing 80, 75, 80 knots here, with pressures generally down into the low 980s. So this does suggest that we did get down into the low 980s. This is a strengthening cyclone, and unfortunately going to be something for Bermuda to have to be monitoring very carefully. Again, here's kind of your hurricane force flight level winds, and this is the low level center circulation in through here. So again, it is not necessarily the most defined storm. It's on the far southeastern edge of this deep convective burst, but it is still trying to strengthen, and we'll have to kind of monitor things pretty carefully. Now, as for kind of what happened, we'll back this up about 24 hours ago, and we'll kind of show the overall evolution for Tropical Storm Paulette. First of all, there was a upper level low, two upper level lows, which is kind of referred to here in this case as a tropical upper tropospheric trough. And you can see one feature here, one such feature here near the Azores Islands, and one to the south here, to the south, or really to the west of Tropical Storm Paulette. Now, what this actually did is, this is from 24 hours ago, but this did create a lot of southwesterly shear on our system, and for that reason, we had a storm that couldn't really intensify up until this point. Now, if we look at actually what happened, we'll move forward here to 6 hours ago, and now what's actually started to happen is not only do we get a retrograding area of low pressure here, but the outflow expanse with Tropical Storm Paulette has actually kind of created a cutoff barrier between this area of low pressure here and the actual storm environment. Now, what this means is that for the rest of Paulette's journey, it's going to be in a more favorable environment to intensify. And you can see there is still some southeasterly shear. This is by 30 hours. This is by really late tomorrow night, about 8 o'clock tomorrow night. We do have still some southeasterly wind direction at the 200 millibar layer. So this is implying that we still have some southeasterly shear being provided by this upper level low. But you can see that it is retrograding, and it's actually retrograded further off towards the south and west. And what this means is that now Paulette is going to be in an area for favorable intensification through the remainder, really, of its journey as a tropical cyclone. Now, of course, once it gets up into the higher latitudes, over the next few days, we're going to start to see it transition from a warm core tropical system, into more of a kind of a cold core mid-latitude cyclone as this trough of low pressure kind of digs in across here. We get this ridge of high pressure and upper level outflow associated with Tropical Storm Sally to kind of develop a ridge, and that also helps to kind of provide for what may be increased vertical wind shear to weaken our storm a little bit more. And that's going to be something that we're going to have to obviously kind of keep in mind. But generally, the worst is going to come, the worst bout of intensification is going to come right when it's near Bermuda. And as it's passing, then eventually it will weaken and get caught up here in that jet stream action and not really be of deep concern to land at all. Now, the one thing that we are going to be watching, though, is in terms of Tropical Storm Sally, we'll kind of switch gears here over to Tropical Storm Sally. We have a ridge of high pressure right now that looks to be building back in, and this is Sally right here in the GFS model. We have a big ridge of high pressure towards the north and also towards the west, but we do have this general weakness, and the steering flow is out of the west-southwesterly direction. That's going to be pushing our storm over towards the northwest. And what that's going to do is you can start to see, though, by hour 60, we start to get this ridge building over top of the storm environment right here. We get this ridge building in and kind of nosing in over our storm, which is going to slow down our storm, and that's going to actually provide for the very heavy rainfall and prolonged period of storm surge. This is going to be a big problem, and this is going to be something that we're going to have to watch just in case if we see an increase in forward speed over the next several days. But the European forecast model is much of the same, really slows down our storm as the ridge kind of builds back in, at least temporarily, and you can see a new storm kind of out there, which happens to be Tropical Depression 20 at the moment. We can also see here on the HWRF for Tropical Storm Paulette. Again, our storm right now, we'll kind of jump it back here to 48 hours ago, where we had a lot of southwesterly shear. And you can actually see this was Tropical Storm Rene out here, which is now a weakening tropical depression. But we had an upper-level anticyclone displaced from Rene that was causing some southwesterly wind shear to be kind of imparted along with this upper level low right here. And you can see this big bout of wind shear that was kind of draped in through this region along with a tropical upper tropospheric trough. Now, since that time, we have actually seen the storm kind of manage to develop upper level outflow, and as such, an anticyclone has kind of developed. And you can kind of see that in the streamline flows here. You've got a storm here developing that anticyclonic outflow and curvature in the kind of the bands there. But you notice that on the south side, our outflow is going to be restricted. This upper level low to the north or to the southwest of our storm is still present, and its presence in the atmosphere is still trying to induce that south shear. So you can kind of see that that is the shear vectors right now. It's still out of the south direction, but now it's going to start tilting over towards the south east, and we can kind of see that. But eventually, by hour 24, that wind shear becomes almost devoid, and really we're just left with a very healthy outflow pattern established with Tropical Storm Paulette. Now, eventually, of course, as it gets caught up here, the shear is going to increase. Our storm's going to encounter a less favorable environment, and our storm is going to start to weaken in a subsequent environment. However, with a Tropical Storm Sally, this is one thing that we're going to have to monitor. So the HWRF forecast here again, this is 12 hours out by late tomorrow night. This is about 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. I'm sorry, this is actually 8 p.m. this evening. What we have kind of going on here is we do have an upper-level anticyclone that's trying to become established in the Gulf of Mexico right now. But we can see there's this little bit of an upper-level low right here that is kind of tugging in on some northwesterly shear. Now, as our storm moves into the Gulf of Mexico, we start to see a much better pattern. This is 36 hours out. The model depicting a hurricane at this point in the model field, but you can also see it is nicely co-located with an upper-level anticyclone over top of our storm. So we have almost a perfect circle of outflow around our storm. Now, our storm is sitting kind of on the northern edge of that outflow, but it's not really a big deal at the moment. But what is a big deal, we see how quickly the storm intensifies. But now this is out to hour 51 here. This is by early Monday morning. The shear direction, this is a trough of low pressure right here, and the kind of the jet max is located in through this region. So this is kind of the jet max, that's our trough axis right here. And now the shear direction is starting to change, that by Monday morning, we're now getting some southeasterly shear or southwesterly shear to start being impinged on our storm. West or southwest shear is possible, and this could hinder the rate of intensification before landfall, and actually may try to at least weaken it a bit, but not a likely scenario at the moment. Our storm kind of just hangs around here. You can see very clearly as this ridge tries to build in and moves very slowly before kind of just milling around here, and we get it kind of this ridge to develop. So it's going to be a very slow moving storm, and all the way out through the rest of its forecast period, the storm doesn't move more than probably really in all kind of reality, the storm doesn't move more than 200 nautical miles to the north since that time of landfall, from about hour 60 all the way out through hour 126. It does not move more than 200 miles. So this is very important because this is going to help to dump a lot of rainfall across that area. And you can also see this trough of low pressure kind of digging in here by really the end of the forecast period. And obviously that rainfall again is going to be a big concern as we kind of progress throughout time. Now, the one other thing that we are going to discuss here is Tropical Depression 20. This is a newly formed tropical cyclone in the Atlantic Basin, and again is the 20th tropical cyclone that we have had this year. Now, if we go down here, we're going to actually go down into the tropical kind of Atlantic region right here. And you can actually see what's kind of cooking on our model right now. So we'll scroll out here to hour 36, and we can see this is tropical, would be Hurricane Paulette at the time. That would be a Hurricane Paulette on the model. We get this ridge of high pressure to kind of build over top of the storm, but it's weakening, obviously, as the storm is going to start to push right through this ridge. Now, on the southern extent of that, this ridge is there, but it's not overly that strong. And here's a strengthening, what would be Tropical Storm Teddy on the model. Now we go out here to hour 60, we have a much better defined tropical cyclone on the model forecast, and we have a very weak ridge to the north and a deepening area of low pressure and kind of trough that's kind of digging in through here across the Azores and north of the Canary Islands. So this kind of upper level low just kind of bulges itself out there, and really only by hour 120 do we start to have any semblance of a ridge. Now what this is going to do is this is going to help to kind of force our storm from being down here. It's going to start to turn our storm towards the northwest here. That is because very weak steering currents kind of down here and very weak ridging is going to cause what's called a beta drift. And a beta drift is basically when you get a tropical cyclone, a strengthening cyclone, it's going to want to move more north. That's kind of just a poleward effect of these tropical cyclones. They have a poleward bias basically, and that's called a beta drift. And the storm is going to do a beta drift to the northwest because our storm is in a very weak kind of ridging environment, and our storm's now going to naturally want to feel that weakness and turn out. And we can see here that the ridge doesn't really build back, kind of stands around here, and we can just kind of run it out again. The storm, the ridge does not build in very significantly, at least on the model, 5 days out to kind of send it over towards the Lesser Antilles at the moment. And one of the things that I've kind of been saying all along is that a strengthening tropical cyclone, the faster that Tropical Depression 20 can become better organized, is the faster that it's going to want to intensify, and subsequently the further northwest it's going to want to travel. And currently the end of the forecast period has us kind of capping out at about 90 miles per hour, or about 80 to 85 knots. So what this is likely to do is cause the storm to feel the natural weakness in the ridge to the north, as it's in a low kind of a weak ridging environment with weak forcing. This is going to try to turn off towards the northwest and eventually be of no consequence. So right now there's no direct threat to this storm to the Lesser Antilles, but again, this is 5 days out, and it is something to just kind of be monitoring. We also will have additional waves that will probably come off of Africa next week that is worth watching, as they too will be coming off at a little bit of lower of a latitude, so we'll just have to watch how that progresses. But again, we'll just have to kind of keep an eye on the ever-evolving situation in the tropics. All right. Well, that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon. Well, not afternoon anymore, but evening. And I will talk to you guys again early tomorrow morning.